Alright, hi everybody. Welcome to Zbot Breeding Lab Day, which is a very exciting day because there is candy involved. So, you and your partner are going to be making a little Zbot baby. It just so happens that Zbots are made from marshmallows and Twizzlers and delicious things. But you have to figure out exactly what your baby's traits are in order to figure out what you're going to build. So, the Zbots are a little bit strange because they don't just have your standard big letter, small letter, dominant, recessive. They have a lot of exceptions to the rules of dominance. So, the law of dominance, which we've been working with, the law of dominance, in this lab we're going to call it LOD, says that the dominant trait always wins over the recessive. We've been doing that for a while. I'm guessing you're more comfortable with it. Great. So now we have exceptions to that law. The first one, if you look on page 65, we're going to fill these in. You have to have your sheet filled in before you come up to show the results of your breeding in order to get the materials to make your Zbot. So, the first exception is called codominance. And codominance is when both of the alleles are dominant. So in some cases, like the example I have here, some birds have black feathers. Some birds have white feathers. Both the black and the white feathers are dominant. So when you put them together, they end up with black and white spots. And they come out spotted because both the black gene and the white gene are trying to express themselves at the same time. And so the genes are basically warring with the cells to figure out like who's going to get this cell and who's going to get that cell. And so you end up with this kind of strange coloring where they're both trying to be expressed at the same time. This is the reason for calico cats. So you've got a cat, paws are white, ears are orange, the body is gray, whatever. That's because almost every color of cat fur is a dominant color. So however many they get, it all shows up. So what we're going to write in our box is codominance is when both alleles for a gene are dominant, so they both show up. Now, incomplete dominance is the same thing, only now we're talking about recessive genes. And recessive genes are just a little bit nicer, let's say. So, with incomplete dominance, both alleles are recessive, and therefore one cannot dominate over the other. So in the example, you have red flowers and yellow flowers. So red is recessive and yellow is also recessive. Move this up so you guys can see a little better. So the red can't win over the yellow can't win over the red. So they end up having to blend, and you end up with orange. So what you end up seeing is a blend of the two colors together. Okay, so you'll notice that I'm using different letters. That's because they are different alleles, and you don't need to use the same letter in this case, because otherwise, how are you going to do two lowercase letters, but somehow they're the same letter? It's too confusing. So it's better to use different letters. Most of the time we try to keep the same letter for the same gene, but in these two cases, that's when you're going to see that difference. Okay, now we have one called Polygenic Traits, and it's exactly like it sounds. So, poly means many, genic is genes. So, in this case, a polygenic trait This is when you have many genes that all come together to make one trait. So you'll notice there's A, B, and C. So it takes 3 genes to make one color. This is also true for your eye color. So humans have a base layer of blue. Every single person in the room has a base layer of blue eyes. Then you have 6 layers of tissue over that blue. So if you have all clear layers, then you would have blue eyes. If you add 1 layer of pigment over the blue, you might look like you have somewhere between a blue and a green. Add another layer, you get green, maybe fading into hazel. And the more layers and the darker the pigment in those layers, the darker the eye color gets. So it's still one trait. When I look at somebody, I see one eye color. But to get to that eye color, it took a series of genes. Many genes, aka polygenic trait. So in this case, it's when one trait is controlled by several genes at the same time. So essentially what you have are layers. So in the case of the example there, dominant is the darker color. So a pomegranate starts yellow. If you're ever in the 200 wing, you'll see there's a pomegranate tree in there, and it always has yellow fruit. So yellow is the base color. That's when it should be under the yellow. There's a typo there. It should be little a, little b, little b, little c, little c. So when you have 3 layers of the recessive gene, that's when you end up with yellow. Then if we make one of the genes dominant, like say we put a big A with the little a, now that one is going to add a little bit of color, a little extra color, so it starts to get darker, orange. Then if we make another one dominant, it gets a little darker, and it keeps going from there. So the thing is, does it matter whether it's big A, or big A, little a? Does that change anything? No, it does not. So if you have a big A, little b, little c, you're still orange, because each of these genes is independent of the other genes. They don't affect each other. It's just that the more of them you have that are dominant, the darker the color gets. So we see a dark burgundy pomegranate because each one of these separate gene combinations of alleles have one dominant allele in each. The dominant wins, So darker, 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 and you end up with a burgundy pomegranate. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, the next one is multiple alleles. Take a second and let folks catch up. Okay, multiple alleles is when you have more than two choices for the same gene. So you only get two of a kind. You get one from mom and one from dad. Whether it's, your hair or your eyes or your toes or whatever. So usually you have a big letter and a little letter. But what happens if there's another letter? Well, that's going to mess things up. We don't have a third case. We don't have like a big case, right? That doesn't exist. So instead, what we're going to have is more choices. And the way we do that is we make a letter, a random letter, that's going to represent dominant or recessive, and then another thing that's going to describe the trait. So I'm going to stick with blood types. So we have blood type A. Well, how do I know that that A is dominant? Well, I'm going to put a nice big I here. The I means absolutely nothing. It's just there to show you dominant. So A is dominant. Blood type B is also dominant. But blood type O is recessive. Now, a lot of people are like, let's not use the I's. Let's just go ahead and we'll stick with the letters and it'll be fine. Okay, so then I make my Punnett square AO. What happens when somebody forgets that O is recessive? So if I put a B over here, right, that would mean blood type B and blood type O. Does anybody have blood type BO? No, it would probably smell bad. It'd be terrible, right? Instead, we have blood type B because B wins over the O because the O is recessive. That's why you need the extra letters. So, what are we going to write for multiple alleles? It is when there are more than two allele options for one gene. So my example, which if you can fit it in the box, please do. My example would be someone who has blood type A who's heterozygous and someone who's blood type B, heterozygous. So my Punnett square would be a dominant letter A, but now I need something to go with that A that is recessive and doesn't show up. That would be my recessive O. So this person has the gene for A and the gene for O. But the A is the one that's dominant, so that's what they have. Let's do the same thing for B. A dominant B and a recessive O. So now when we put these blood types together, we have blood type AB, blood type B, blood type A, and blood type O. So let's talk about this one for a second. We have someone with a blood type that's got two dominant genes, but they're different. So looking back at our earlier laws, which law applies? Correct. Codominance. So because the A and the B are both dominant, they both show up and the person has blood type AB. If the person has a blood type B, but it's matched to a recessive, the recessive loses like always, and this person has blood type B. But if blood type O is matched to another O, you end up with blood type O. So all multiple alleles is saying is that you're still only going to get 2 alleles. You get one from your mom, one from your dad. They have 2 alleles. Everybody has 2 alleles. The point is there's more than 2 options. Instead of having 2 options, we have 3. 1, 2, 3. Multiple alleles. Okay, so take a second, fill that in. So the law of segregation, that last piece, is saying that when a parent makes their sex cells, those 2 alleles are going to split. So, for example, if we talk about Squidward, and he's heterozygous for being pink. So he's got the gene for dominant pink and the gene for recessive yellow. So here's my Squidward alleles. So when Squidward takes one of his squiddy cells and decides to make spermy cells, you end up with one sperm that is a big Q that's going to pass on the pink, or you're going to have a sperm with the little q, and you're not sure which one is going to make the race, right? So let's say Squidward's lady friend, I forget her name, let's say she's got an egg with a big Q. So either way, whether this sperm wins or this sperm wins, this kid is coming out pink no matter what because of that dominant allele. But the point of the law of segregation is that they have a 50-50 shot, because when you make sex cells, you split your genes. So you're either going to give your kid the gene you got from your mom originally, or the gene you got from your dad originally. So for every single one of your genes, whatever the letter is, whether it's M or N or R, whatever the case is, when it comes time to make the sex cells, these split into different sex cells. So how do we write that down? Okay, so the law of segregation states that any organism will split its 2 alleles into separate sex cells. And you can do a little picture of the Q's. They're all together, but when you make sex cells, they end up in separate cells. Do you love my drawings? I know you do. And last but not least, we have sex-linked traits. Woo! This one's a doozy. So, sex-linked trait is specifically a trait that's on one of your sex chromosomes. So, you have 46 chromosomes. Numbers 45 and 46 are either an X and another X, in which case you are female, or X and Y, in which case you're male. So there are genes that you can only find on a male chromosome. So think of things that only males tend to have. Those would be on the Y chromosome. But there's a lot of stuff that's on the X chromosome that both males and females need. Things like, for example, how to build the cells in your eyes. Now, why is the information for building the cells in your eyes on the same gene for how to make boobs? Well, I don't know, but it just is. So they are linked to your sex chromosomes. So the X's and Y's are sex chromosomes. Anything else that happens to be on there, they're linked chromosomes. So for sex-linked traits, it's any gene that is found on the two sex chromosomes, X or Y. So we're not going to get into this in as much detail today. Let's just consider this. If it's on the Y and you're a girl, are you going to get it? No. If it's on the X and you're a male, are you going to get it? Probably. Because the X is the only X you've got. So if it's on there, chances are you're getting it. So we'll get into that in more detail on another day. What I'd like you to do now is, with a partner, you're going to make your Zbot baby. So notice it shows a list. So it says big A, little a, your genotype, your partner's genotype. So you pick your set of genes, whatever genes you want. So for example, if you want to be big A, do that. Go for it. Does it matter what your partner is? No. Leave your partner alone. Let them do their own thing. So you make your column. So let's say I'm going to be big A. Maybe I want to do little b, big C, little d, big D, E. And then I get to this weird one. It says GH, but notice there's a little g and a little h. That means you can either choose a little g or a little h. There is no such thing as a big G. There is no big H. So you pick either little g, or little g, little h, or little h. Up to you. It's your choice, but you can only choose from the alleles that are given. Okay? So where it says big K, big L, you can pick either a big K, big K, big K, big L, big L, big L. All right? There is no such thing as the little L. Don't put little L. Okay? The next one is weird. It's got all these extra letters. This is an example where you need 2 of each kind. So for that one, I might choose little s, big F, big R, little r. Whatever combination you want, as long as you have 2 of each of the letters. And last but not least, you get to decide who's going to be the boy and who's going to be the girl. And so you see X's and Y's. So one of you needs to be XX, and one of you needs to be XY. Let's get just that far. Have fun, pick your own letters. I'll be back.